meeting held in Gurgaon in the last week of February and the 1st March. The 3-day working group meeting held very intense deliberations on issues like fugitive economic offenders, asset recovery, information sharing, institutional mechanism for combating corruption, and mutual legal assistance. So in that series, the second meeting is being organized in Rishikesh from 25th to 27th of May. And to brief on that, we are honored to have Honorable Minister of State for Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions, Minister for Science, Technology, PMO, Department of Atomic Energy and Space, Dr. Jitendra Singh ji. A very warm welcome to you, sir. And we also have Srimati Radha Chauhan, Secretary DOPT. So first, I would like to request Madam Radha Chauhan to brief you, on the subject of this Rishikesh meeting. Basically, it will be focusing on gender and anti-corruption efforts. So please, ma'am.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for taking time out and coming on a very short notice for this briefing. We are starting our second working group deliberations tomorrow in Rishikesh. And this is a follow-up on, as was mentioned here, the March 1st working group meeting, and the subject being anti-corruption. This looks at how the G20 countries can come together on building a informational as well as an operational framework for networking, for sharing information with proper operationalization for supporting, which includes mutual legal assistance, the fugitive economic offenders, how to prevent their safe havens, and how do you contribute and collaborate with each other for ensuring that the anti-corruption initiatives of these countries are much more enhanced by way of efficiency and effectiveness in which the countries deal with these issues. We are also bringing in especially the role of audit institutions in anti-corruption. So this is one of the major highlights that this working group will be working again. The integrity and effectiveness of public bodies and authorities which are responsible for preventing corruption. तो इसमें हम लोग उन संस्थाओं को जो एंटी करप्शन का कार्य देख रही हैं, उनको एड्रेस कर रही हैं, उनके अंदर जो इंटीग्रिटी और इफेक्टिवनेस, उनके जो कार्य करने का इंटरनल प्रोसेसेस हैं, उसको भी किस तरह से सुदृढ़ीकृत किया जाए, उस पर भी इस डेलिब्रेशंस के दौरान ध्यान दिया जाएगा. आईसीटी को किस माध्यम से और इफ़ेक्टिवली यूज़ कर सकते हैं इंफॉर्मेशन शेयरिंग के लिए, ऑपरेशंस के लिए. और जैसे कि बताया गया, जेंडर, महिलाओं पे इसका करप्शन के एक्टिविटीज़ का कितना प्रभाव पड़ता है, सिंस द विमेन आर स्पेशली वल्नरेबल व्हेन इट कम्स टू corruption related activities, because they also need to be empowered so that they are not as vulnerable in accessing very critical government services while they come to interface with the governance structures. That also will be highlighted. I'm sure the Minister will touch upon it more elaborately. On to you, sir, for a detailed briefing for the press.
I think Secretary DOPT has explained to you sufficiently enough. We are into this year of G20, and as I said earlier also on one of the occasions, this happens to be a very special year from India's point of view. We are hosting G20 under Prime Minister Modi. This also happens to be the International Year of Millets. So most of the G20 events are also showcasing that aspect of it, which also was being observed at the behest of India. And this is the second time in 9 years. Earlier it was International Yoga Day, which was also proposed by Honorable Prime Minister, and UNO declared 31st June as the International Day of Yoga. And I think G20 happening at 60 locations presently is one of the unique features of this phenomenon. None of the other countries so far has gone through such a huge, elaborate spectrum of showcasing. And I think it's also befitting India because we are a heterogeneous country. East is different from West, North different from South, North is different from North, any other part. So we have events happening in Arunachal as far as the most northern eastern part we have in West. We had just concluded today one event in Srinagar. And following the same pattern, also the different groups are following the same pattern. Now, today per se, we are dealing with the anti-corruption group or anti-corruption working group. We've already had one such meeting in Gurugram, and this is the second one, which is going to take place in Rishikesh, and then subsequently in Mumbai would be the ministerial, Kolkata, and then the Mumbai one. And each meeting we tend to carry forward the final draft and finally before we present it in the last meeting. The main focus, as you would recall, soon after Prime Minister Modi took over in 2014, his main flagship declarations of intent were twofold. A, zero tolerance against corruption, and B, zero tolerance against terrorism. And if you see the focus and the direction in which this anti-corruption working group has been moving over the last few years, you would realize that we have sought to address both these flagship priorities laid down by Prime Minister Modi for us. The main focus of this being the offenders, the increasing number of money launderers and the economic offenders who leave the country after committing crime, then seek refuge in a different country where the law may be differently placed or maybe more liberal from their point of view. So that was one challenge. The other is the utilization of this money for wrong reasons, and to prevent that, to get back those assets which have been pilfered away. So A, economic offenders, B, the booty carried by them, how to recover. And that also easily connects with the other part of it, the terror funding. Because if you do not effectively recover what has been taken away by these internationally moving economic offenders, it might lead to adding some kind of supplementation to the terror machinery operating internationally. And therefore, money laundering and terror funding. These are the two possible outcomes which were there in mind, and most of the countries were in agreement. India has always been open to cooperate, and even the meeting that begins tomorrow, this will be an occasion for us to reiterate India's resolve against economic offenders. And before I speak on the agenda that they have laid down, let me also remind you that the 2018 G20 meeting was addressed by Prime Minister Modi himself, in which he laid a very significant emphasis on action against fugitive economic offenses and B, on the asset recovery. And for that, he also laid down a 9-point agenda or a 9-point roadmap, which broadly consists of A, the legal processes and mechanisms to deny safe haven to all fugitive economic offenders, because that is where most of the countries and nations have to come on board, so that we cooperate with each other, not allowing the offender from another country to make use of the law as it prevails over here. B, the effective implementation of the international commitments that we have to each other. C, the formulation of a standard definition of fugitive economic offender, because the constitutions are different. Someone who is offender to me may be to a lesser extent offender to you, and likewise. D, the setting up of a common platform to share experiences and best practices. Because crime is crime, so instead of having different ways of dealing with it, we could actually also learn with each other and also share with each other's experience. And initiation of the work on locating properties of economic offenders, because that's another challenge, where they have parked these assets. And from that point of view, the meeting which is happening tomorrow will have 5 broad themes. A, the international cooperation for strengthening fight against corruption, which would encompass all, which will be sharing of the combating corruption strategies by different countries, by strengthening of the asset recovery mechanisms, the analyzing and effectiveness of existing mutual legal assistance framework. This is, in our phraseology, this has come to be known as MLAs, which you can interpret your way. So it's a mutual legal assistance framework. How do you go about with consolidating your MLA framework? So that's one aspect. The second is the integrity and effectiveness of the public bodies and the authorities which are in place already, how to make them more effective in dealing with this. Because the evolution of crime, both in the terms of how it is carried out, also keeps evolving from day to day. And now, to a large extent, also becoming technology driven. The technology itself is also evolving. So we also need to revisit our public authorities, our agencies which are dealing with it, and also our framework which is meant to address it. The third theme is the role of audit institutions in anti-corruption. And under this theme, India has built upon the work done by the previous presidency to create a compendium of the good practices. So I think this is one contribution which is going to be made from Indian side. We have also tried to create a repository of the earlier G20s as far as the anti-corruption theme is concerned. Fourth, the leverage information of communication technology. So how to leverage that? The information communication technology. Now we have quantum technologies also. So all the new technologies sometimes are taken up by the crime committers earlier than the others. So how do we actually keep pace with that? And fifth, which is going to be a value addition and also an exclusive addition, keeping very much with the Indian ethos, as Secretary DOPT was saying, is going to be a new element being added to this, the side event on gender and corruption. And as she was saying, that the receiving end mostly of the corrupt practices is borne by the women folk in our society, regardless of whatever be the nature of society. So to focus on that, to deliberate on that, and incidentally we have a woman minister, Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi, who would be also attending that and participating in that session. And I think that's at the end of it, we will come out with a draft which will be taken to the next draft. So that's the agenda for the Rishikesh, G20 Rishikesh.
Thank you, sir, for this broad 5 agendas that you have elaborated before the media persons. If you have any questions, please. Yeah, Prashant.
कितनी उम्मीद है कि G20 की जब मीटिंग होगी, जो एक्सचेंजेस होंगे, तो जो आपके फ्यूजिटिव्स हैं, विजय माल्या, नीरव मोदी वगैरह, इनको वापस लाने में मदद मिलेगी दूसरे देशों से? क्या ये डिस्कस का इम्पोर्टेंट मुद्दा होगा?
निश्चय जो हमारा चर्चा होती है ब्रॉड बेस्ड व्यापक चर्चा होती है, किसी व्यक्ति विशेष को नहीं होती जब इस तरह का फोरम है, क्योंकि 20 हमारे देश हैं G20 के, उसके अतिरिक्त 10 हैं इनवाइटी और उसके अतिरिक्त है नॉन गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, और इंडिविजुअली कुछ भिन्न भिन्न कंसर्न्स भी रहते हैं, लेकिन जो कॉमन कंसर्न है उसमें ये आ रहा है। और ये एक ऐसा फिनोमेना है जो पिछले कुछ वर्षों में दूसरे देशों को भी उसका एहसास होने लगा, उसका सामना करने पर। अब ये ऐसा नहीं रहा कि केवल भारत को ही इसका भुगतान करना पड़ रहा है, क्योंकि जो इकोनॉमिक ऑफेंडर है आज यहाँ से उठ करके वहाँ गया, वहाँ बेशक उसने शरण ले ली, कल वहाँ से उठ करके कहीं और भी जा सकता है। और इसलिए अब धीरे धीरे ये समझ में आने लगा कि इसके लिए हमारे पास एक संयुक्त स्ट्रैटेजी, एक कॉमन ग्लोबल स्ट्रैटेजी की आवश्यकता है। और मुझे लग रहा है कि पिछली मीटिंग का भी जो अनुभव रहा हमारा गुरुग्राम में, धीरे धीरे हर मीटिंग के बाद, हर सक्सेसिव मीटिंग के बाद ये एहसास भी और शिद्दत पकड़ता जाता है कि वी हैव टू कम टुगेदर एंड शेयर आवर प्रैक्टिसेस एंड इवॉल्व स्ट्रैटेजी। और कहीं कहीं रिवायती तौर पर कुछ ऐसा कानून रहता है, कुछ ऐसे नियम रहते हैं जो उस समय निर्धारित किए गए जब शायद इस प्रकार के संकट का सामना नहीं करना पड़ता था, या कभी कल्पना नहीं थी कि इस तरह का भी आएगा। अब कभी कभी ऐसी टेक्नोलॉजी आ गई है कि जिसके माध्यम से इस तरह के क्राइम होते हैं, तब उस समय नहीं थे। तो उसको लेकर के भी, और जहाँ तक भारत का संबंध है, हमने खुले मन से इसमें पूरा सहयोग देने के लिए इच्छा प्रकट की है। You want to add? नहीं, अब व्यक्ति विशेष को लेकर के तो आपको वो जो एजेंसीज हैं वो बता सकती हैं किसके खिलाफ है। डीओपीटी का मैंडेट थोड़ा सा उस सीमा से थोड़ा पहले समाप्त हो जाता है। ये नीति निर्धारित करने वाला विभाग है। व्यक्ति विशेष को लेकर के तो गृह मंत्रालय और जो हमारी संबंधित एजेंसीज हैं।
जैसे विजेता सिंह हिंदू
जेंडर एंड करप्शन के बारे में थोड़ा elaborate कर सकते हैं, how does it impact?
Nobody no better than Mrs. Radha to do that.
I can illustrate a small instance of, if you can imagine, a woman going to accessing credit. We are talking about small individual entrepreneurs, especially the women-led entrepreneurship. You would have heard about the government e-marketplace, the GEM, from where the government of India procures all kinds of services and goods. Before GEM came into being, women could not think of directly having an access to do business with the government of India. Now, to imagine a small entrepreneur from a remote area, a male entrepreneur from a remote area itself was difficult at that point in time. Of course, the technology came in and they were able to do it. But on GEM, when they started an initiative called Umania, where they said, women entrepreneurs, we are going to encourage you to get onboarded, avail of a business opportunity of directly doing business with government. The immediate success of the significant numbers of women entrepreneurs who could immediately get on board gives you a sense of the moment you make anything that is opaque into something that is very transparent, the vulnerable section, which is the women who had the potential to do business, to be entrepreneurs, but who were vulnerable enough not to enter into it because of the concerns they would have had in going to a government office, interacting with an officer on a lot of issues, and also understanding that there may be corruption-related practices which might be in vogue as part of a traditional way of working in government at that point in time. All of that taken care by both digitalization as well as understanding that women need a little different approach, because considering their social and economic vulnerability, any anti-corruption activity by way of strategy or even tactics would need to have a little more sensitive handling and customization, keeping in mind that some of the services that are delivered need to be customized to understanding women from vulnerable areas, vulnerable sections of the society, culturally and otherwise, would be partaking of those services. And how do you address those corruption-related issues? It is not one broad stroke where you say, I have done an anti-corruption initiative and it addresses their issues. Is probably you have to do a more nuanced look at when you think of major stakeholders of that service being women. And it is evident when we did it on GEM, where there was no women entrepreneur. The moment you sort of customized and aligned into their requirements, taking into their access and other vulnerabilities and limitations, you immediately opened up a huge area of potential where they thrived and are continuing to thrive. So the concern, the focus on the side event tomorrow, where we have entrepreneurs from SHGs, local SHG in Uttarakhand, they'll come and share their experiences of how corruption and overcoming those corruption led to a massive group of self-help Mahila Mandals come into an area and actually flourish in delivering and making themselves empowered both financially and otherwise. This is what this side event would, for the first time, bring into fore, and we hope that going ahead, G20 will sort of subsume it as part of their main agenda. which is looking into the anti-corruption subject matter. We aim to do it based on tomorrow's, how it pans out, how the partners look at it and take
This
it.
is the final draft is yet to be developed. This, they are going to, float an idea, considering the concern for women that this country and this government has traditionally reiterated time and again. And I think much of the gender neutrality in this issue can be brought by the increasing use of technology as well, which has in fact brought in a lot of it. And let's see when the discussion comes up whether it gets limited only to preventing, protecting women as victims of corruption, or also reducing corruption among women or through women, because it could be both ways. But let's see how it evolves.
Any more questions, please?
नहीं, वो तो ऐसा है ना कि वो हमारा already considered है. That part is part of the main agenda of the anti-corruption working group, which is being carried forward from one meeting to the other, also from one G20 to the other. It was part of the earlier G20s also. As I mentioned, the G20 5 years back, 2018, the Argentine, where Prime Minister Modi himself, emphasized India's two-pronged approach and gave us an 9-point framework also, or a roadmap. So that is because that part of it, the economic offenders and economic fugitives, the offender fugitives going out and see their assets, where they park and cause loss to whom. So this part of it is increasing, it's enlarging every passing year, and more countries are feeling the heat of it. And therefore, I think the consensus is gradually coming forward. And India has always been in the forefront of sensitizing all the other member nations to have a common approach, and also accordingly frame a common strategy. Is that right?
हाँ बस जी कान साहब.
पिछले दिनों में कुछ ऐसी बात आई है, जैसे महिलाएं चंदा कोचर झारखंड की आईएएस महिला करप्शन में काफी पकड़ी गई है, तो भारत की महिलाएं और देशों की तुलना में ज्यादा करप्शन को बढ़ा रही है, या अभी हम
ये एक्चुअली अगर आप में से कुछ मित्र कल ऋषिकेश में रहें तो वहाँ आपको अवसर रहेगा देखने का किस दिशा में ये बहस जाती है, कि एक जैसे राधा जी ने कहा कि महिला को बचाना करप्शन से, और जैसा आपने दूसरी दिशा ली कि महिला के माध्यम से हो रहे वाली करप्शन से दूसरों को बचाना. तो ये तो कल के, लेकिन कुल मिलाकर के एक नया विषय है, और इस विषय की संवेदनशीलता इस बात में झलकती है कि ये भारत के जो मूल संस्कार हैं उससे जुड़ा हुआ है, और एक इस तरह से एक अपनी तरफ से एक योगदान है, क्योंकि हम मेज़बान देश भी हैं. लेकिन अभी ऐसा नहीं है कि फाइनल ड्राफ्ट का हिस्सा बना है, लेकिन एक विचार रखा गया है भारत की ओर से.
Any more questions, please? Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, my dear friends.